Ko tubua te kaua, ko tau i te kaua, ko te mātoi o te rangi tēnei rā te taketake. He rungo mārua watu mā wakaeketia ki runga. Ko oru koe o ka tupuria, he Hauāuru, he Hauāuru. In August 2014, Te Ati Haunui a Pāparangi signed a deed of settlement with the New Zealand government, which settled the long-standing claim our people have had over the Whanganui River for over a century and a half. The Whanganui River is the third longest river in New Zealand, at just over 300 kilometres in length. It drains approximately 7,000 square kilometres of geologically young and therefore erosion-prone hill country. The Whanganui rises on the western slopes of the Hauāuru, the mountains of the central volcanic plateau, where the headwaters have been tapped for the production of hydroelectricity via the Tongariro power scheme since the 1970s, something our people were not consulted over and continue to oppose. Beginning in the 1880s, laws were passed to force the physical removal of pātuna and utupiaro, eel and lamprey wares, to allow for the passage of river steamers into the interior of the North Island. In doing so, the government embarked on a less than subtle program aimed at undermining the reliance on, and therefore relationship, that the Whanganui tribes have had with the river for over 1,000 years. When I consider the history of Whanganui claim for the river, it has always essentially been about the same ancient edict of our old people. Kaua kai kōrero mō te awa, kōrero ki te awa. Do not merely speak of the river but address it directly. In March 2017, legislation was passed in the New Zealand House of Representatives that supported at law tupua te kaua, the innate values of the Whanganui River, as understood by the indigenous peoples of this river. The result of the negotiations with the New Zealand government was to accord the Whanganui River the status of legal person. The Whanganui River is now known as Te Awa Tupua. We think it's really important to understand that legal personhood is really only the vehicle for carrying the fundamental rights of nature. The innate values of Te Awa Tupua have been supported at law through this legal person. So if we take this view of the river, it's from the upper reaches, virgin forest, and the waters are clear and clean. And we're reminded that the river is both a physical as well as spiritual entity. So the first value that is part of the definition of this river now is ko te awa te matapuna o te aura. The river is the source of spiritual and physical sustenance. So we have an emotional attachment with our rivers. We have a spiritual attachment, and all peoples can understand and share that. The second value is indivisibility. E rere kau mai te awa nui mai te kāwi maunga ki Tangaro. The great river flows from the mountains to the sea. If we are to address the river's issues, we must address it as a whole. If we are going to address what is best for the river, we must address it in its totality. We can't address it through its compartments. And I use this image because the child in the photograph is my paternal grandmother, and those are the people who adopted and brought her up. They come from other parts of the river, and rather than viewing her as a subset of the whole, they brought her up and treated her as the whole that she is, the whole child that belongs to the whole tribe. And so it's a good example of an Indigenous way of thinking, of viewing somebody as a whole, of being able to view the river as a whole at the same time. And it's from that basis that we start to address those matters and those issues that afflict our river. And so this picture is of the old people who took the claim for our river beginning in the late 1920s. The third value relates to the place that Indigenous peoples have on our river, our tribe's long-standing relationship with the river, which is innate. We are inextricably intertwined and aligned with our river. We are the river and the river is us. So this journey has been a long one, but it's been one based on some fundamental principles. And so if we consider the river as both physical and spiritual, is indivisible, That indivisibility relates also to its Indigenous peoples. That gives us a solid foundation to move on and include the rest of our community in the thinking. And so this next image represents the communities coming together, the Indigenous community, the non-Indigenous community around Te Awa Tupua, this new status for the river. And it speaks of the small and large streams that flow into one another, ngā manga iti, ngā manga nui e ono kauana. They flow into one another and form one river. And so really it's a call for all communities to come together under the definition of this new status for the river, this new legal person. So it's an inclusive proposition. Peoples of all identities are included because they use and live with the river, and so they're responsible for it. The paradigm has shifted to Indigenous values, to viewing the river at the centre of our relationship with natural resources, but nonetheless it speaks of our obligation to work with the river and work for it fundamentally, and then it can provide for all of us. So really that's it. Those four values called tupua te kawa define this new legal person. And it's really the values are the important thing to understand, because those values are the values that we want all communities to adopt. Indigenous values, but ones that are shared in the best interests of our river. And in doing that, we're according our river rights, but we're also stating that fundamentally the ones that need to uphold those rights are all peoples that use and interact with that river, regardless of whether we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. We fought for 150 years or more to have our Indigenous view recognised at law. The law is a vehicle. The driver are the fundamental values that we express as Indigenous peoples on a daily basis. Tihei Māori ola, ki te whai au, ki te ao marama. Kia ora.
E rere kau mai te awa nui, mai te kāhui manga ki tangaroa, koe te awa ko te awa ki koe. I ngā manga iti, e ngā manga nui e hono kauana i raro i te maru o tēnei piringa ware, tēnā kouta katoa. Just like to start by recognising my tuakana Gerard, who's opened the session for me today. And to actually say I'm really nervous today, because I feel like a bit of a fraud. This is a Māori Fisheries conference and I'm a really terrible fisherman. Even when I went out on the charter with some of my whanaunga that are here in this room, I didn't even catch hardly any fish. So I just want to say the fishermen I use, te a koutou, and some of our fishermen are here in this room. So thankfully, they're going to speak about that real mahi. My kaupapa here today is to share with you the work that we've been doing under Te Awa Tupua. It's really hard to because you're all dark, so I can't see your expression. So hopefully you're still awake. It's a really hard time to kōrero before lunch because everyone's usually hungry. So I'll try and keep this entertaining but useful to you. So anyway. I've got to remember to push the button. Ko Norway Mātou, so where are we from and what is this about? They asked me to come and talk about co-governance and I said, well, we don't do co-governance, we do Te Awa Tupua. So I can come and talk about that in the mahi that we've been doing at home. And so Gerard's provided a really good opening to this and he's talked about the values and the recognition that we've been able to achieve in legislation for our awa. And what we've managed to do is put it back together, because essentially the RMA Act treats it as component parts and it's dissected it. Through our legislation, we've been able to get recognition for the total catchment. So all of the manga iti and the manga nui that contribute to our awa are part of this process that we have achieved. All of the iwi, all of the hapu are part of the process that we have achieved in getting recognition for Te Awa Tupua. As Gerard talked about, all of the councils are responsible for giving effect now to our value system. So I just wanted to give you an insight to the landscape, because some people think we're from Manawatu or we're from Taranaki. How come they don't know we're from Whanganui? We descend from te kāhui maunga, I te pito te ika. And I wanted to reflect on Rake Poho's dad, Archie, Tā Archie Tairoa. And Uncle Archie said, Whanganui have sought to preserve their rights. We have protested, petitioned the Crown, and pursued our claims before numerous courts, tribunals, and such litigation has often seen issues narrowed such that we are almost unrecognisable in Māori terms. And when we think about all of the things, and many of the things that we've discussed today, we've been chopped up and made to think about things in really component parts. And before we achieved the settlement, if something was happening on the awa, the RMA Act requires you to just worry about that place. But for us, you have to worry about who's upstream, who's downstream. And Uncle Archie used to talk to one of our karaua up in the upper catchment, and Koro Harry would say, where's my bloody tuna, Archie? And Uncle would say, well, they've got to go past Whanganui first before they get to you. So that's addressing the totality of the journey of our kai, the totality of the conversation that we have to have, and in terms of what Uncle's saying, put ourselves back together, be who we are. So we didn't, in our journey to achieve recognition for Te Awa Tupua, we didn't get one single place that becomes the decision maker. We created a pā. And in that pā is a whole suite of arrangements that essentially give effect to upholding te mano te wai for our awa and te mano te iwi. And Gerard talked a little bit about us achieving settlement and the legislation, but it also doesn't usurp the mana or exercise any customary rights or responsibilities. So our hapu, our whānau are still able to exercise their own customary rights and responsibilities, and it's really important to protect those things. I was saying to Rake, your koro's going to come up. He goes, my koro's down the awa. But this is his karaua who fought as part of our legacy for the awa. And so one of the important things was putting it back together and recognising that it's living, it's indivisible, you can't chop it up. From the mountains to the sea, just like the girls talked about for their awa, from the mountains to the sea, including all of its elements, physical and metaphysical. For a long time, the Crown has been an absent party in their responsibilities. They've owned the bed, but we've never seen them turn up for any hearings, for anything in relation to consents for that bed. They've been absent in that space. So now that has come back to the awa itself, and the people responsible for looking after the interests of the awa, Te Pau Tupua, and one of those is here in this hui today. They're responsible for representing that in life. Now the awa is recognised in its own right. And the hapu of the awa look after its interests as well. Anytime somebody wants to do something in relation to where they are, they have to go see the hapu. They don't come to Ngā Tangata Tiaki. We're not the consenting authority. The people are. So this is putting us back into the picture, putting us back together again. Tupua te kawa, so the 4 values that Gerard talked about before are in legislation. So we've heard about what the National Policy Statement for Freshwater does, and many of you are engaged in conversations about te mano te wai at the moment. We're in Wellington currently making sure that they don't diminish what we've already achieved. Because we're there. We've achieved it in statute and in legislation, recognition for our values and for the river itself. And so that's our current piece of work that's going on. And I think it's really important, and you know, I talk to them when we're in our hui with my other cousins about the fact that we're sophisticated. The way that we have and do things as a people in general, we are sophisticated. Don't let anybody else tell you that we're not. We just need to make sure that we speak in our own language. Because what they tend to do, and we've seen some examples of how difficult it is to deconstruct ourselves to fit into their little boxes. Don't do that. Don't deconstruct yourself. Next minute, they'll be going, oh, Nancy, she's all shit. No. Anyway, just be, you know, just put ourselves back together again. So, ko te awa te matapuno o te ora, you know, we'd always have to go to the hearings and to all of the processes and talk about what the awa meant to us in terms of our well-being and present examples and blah-de-blah-de-blah. We don't have to do that now. It's one of the values that's been recognised, and they have to put it. Everybody who's responsible for giving effect to legislation in relation to that catchment, they have to give effect to this. E rere kaumai, I te awa nui mai te kāhui maunga ki Tangaroa, from the top to the bottom. So considering the impacts above, below, who else needs to be in the conversation, talking to your neighbours, them talking to you, recognising our place as wānau, as hapu, as iwi. Oh, hang on. It's a bit flash, this thing. Ko au te awa, ko te awa, ko au. So similarly, we'd have to get our pāhake kaumātua to continually go before the hearings and talk about who we were and make sure that they knew that we existed. Ko au te awa, ko au. We don't have to do that. That value's there. Now we have every Tom, Dick and Harry turning up because someone told them that to come and see us. It's like, you know, you can't win, but at least they're coming. You know, at least they're coming. And it's a 5-second conversation most of the time. But when it's not, it's like, okay, you need to go see these people. These are the people that you need to talk to. Nā manga iti, nā manga nui, e hono hono kauana ka tupu, Te Awa Tupua. So all of the small streams, everybody is a contributor to the well-being of the awa. Wherever it is, if it is part of our awa system, then they're part of the conversation. So we do have to, like Rake said, you know, he said be friends with the Crown. We have to be friends with the farmers. We have to be friends with everybody who's around us that impacts on the way that we live and, more importantly, on the well-being of our awa. So what does it mean to give effect to Te Awa Tupua? Te pā aurua is the foundation, just like it was in the old days. Our pā that was the source of our kai, that distributed throughout the hapu and then more broadly into the mountain reaches when we used to share different kai sources. It's the foundation. It's a suite of arrangements that collectively work together to achieve tupua te kawa and upholding Te Awa Tupua. It's not just one body or authority. And sometimes even ourselves, we get, you know, we've been so well colonised, they ring us up and say, who do we need to talk to? Who's going to give us a decision? No one's going to give you a decision, especially not today. So, you know, that's changing, it's changing all of that mindset about, I'll just go there and they can give me authority, consent or whatever. Well, no, you can't. So you better start now if you're going to think about doing something on our awa. Otherwise, if you've seen where we had a bridge down there, it sat there for a year or so because they didn't do the right thing. Who buys a bridge and then comes and asks you if it's okay to put it up? Pākehās do. Anyway, Kirite's in the room. You can talk to her over dinner tonight. She'll tell you all about it because that's where they live. That's their hapu. But, you know, so it's not just one body or authority. And we're not here to replicate the responsibilities of others. We're not here to do the council's job. There's not enough of us for starters. We wouldn't be able, we don't want those responsibilities because they're transactional. All they want to do is transact. They want to give you your right to go and build something or take water or do something. It's transactional. We've moved to a new space. It's called relationships. You have to actually agree when you want to do something in somebody's ware, kainga, whenua, about what that looks like and how that happens. So Te Awa Tupua is about that. It's relational. As part of the suite of arrangements, we've got Te Kōpuka. That is a 17 representative group trying to cover all of those kind of interests. The councils, the mayors are on it. We've got somebody from Fish and Game, somebody from the environmental sector on there. We've got representation from all of the iwi that participate or live in the catchment. So it's a pretty big rōpū, but we've got the values that everybody drives to. So we've got that common purpose, the well-being of the awa, common purpose. The most important thing is that it's chaired by us, and the vice chair is us too. So, if we want to address equity, you have to address the power. You have to take the power. And Hera's in the room. She's the vice chair on Te Kōpuka, so if you want to know more about that, go to Hera. I'm giving out all these jobs. No, but Hera's in the room, and she's got a tihati or like me, a poraka like me, so if you find her, you can talk to her about Te Kōpuka. And that's an inclusive process, and it's saying everybody has a role to play. They have a responsibility. They have an obligation. We can talk about rights, but how are you upholding your responsibility? So making them all accountable. And it requires the people to build relationships, gets them to stop transacting. It's indigenising decision-making processes of our awa communities by ensuring hapu at place are at the centre. Man, this has felt like a bit of a speed date, eh? I'm already 2 minutes over time, so I'm really conscious of the time that I've been given, and I cannot do this justice in 20 minutes. So I'm going to leave the last words of my kōrero to one of our kuia. And because she gives us a measure that we all should drive to. We've got kuia karaua still living that give us measures about where we need to get back to. So I'm going to give us a message from Te Manawa Nui Paurua and leave her to tell us the end.
Kuia e nei me puta mai e tangata. Whanga e te tangata. Mā wekai, tokurai. Ki te aere I runga I te oio. Ki te uiti I te awa I runga I te oio. Ena mai ai au. Roto Whanganui. Te aere ki te au ika, ki te au pāriri. Ka maroke. Ngā kai e kore pirau. E te pirangi ngā ka wāwātu. Ka ere ki te muru. Muri pūa. Ka ere ki romotu. Te wai are e taku papa nā nau. Ka ki te au tēnā mea. E roto I ngā wawa. Ki te I kōura. I tiki ngā rarau e ka panga ki roto. Ara e tō ki te ngā te putu tō te. Nē. E te uku manga ke noa. Kai roto ngā kōura. O tēnā kaipai. Tēnā. Te etuna. Etuna rere. Heo tēnā ko te awa. Koe nā te wai kaukau. Koe nā tō mātau oroinga. I mātau e tamariki ana. Ka aria e ngā kuia me ngā tupuna. ki ngā māuiuitanga o te tangata. Koina, ko te wai o te awa, te wai kai. A ko ngā puna, te awa. Ngā kuia katoa, ngā tupuna katoa. A ko te mea no e taiki kai tōna ore, a pai ana. Ka rea ke i roto i ngā kāo, te wai, ke ngā pūrangi. O tēnā, a koe kai e, taiki kai tō kāinga, a ka re mama o te puna ki a koe. Koina, ko Whanganui. Tupua ke au roto i Whanganui, mātau, kāre ko au nā e. Mātau kuia, mea mātau te puna. E ingoa kārangaranga noa o tēnā te Whanganui arua. Nā ngā iwi tēnā kōrero, te Whanganui arua.